Hello, historians. Welcome back to Cocktails and Cliff Notes. I'm your host, Mason, and today I'm very excited. I'm going to ask you to do a few things really quick. I'm going to ask you to grab your tent and your sleeping bags and something to start a fire, maybe a fishing pole, something like that, because we're going camping and we're camping out in the 1800s and we're going to be here for a while. Okay, now picture this: there's a young republic, barely a generation old, no real navy, no gold vaults, overflowing, no certainty it would even survive the century, and yet this fragile little nation somehow pulls off one of the greatest land deals in human history. This was a deal so unexpected that it stunned all of Europe. This was a deal so legally questionable that even its architect doubted it would survive the Constitution. This was a deal that doubled the size of the United States overnight and very quietly transformed a coastal located experiment into a continental power. This is the story of the Louisiana Purchase. Now, this is not just how America bought the land, but how fear, ambition, revolution, disease, and chance collided at exactly the right moment, the perfect timing. The stars aligned and it ended up changing the fate of an entire hemisphere. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to pour us something a little bit sweet to drink. And if you do want to skip that, go ahead and use the timestamps below and be on the lookout for more content like this because I post every Tuesday and every Thursday. And if you like history and you just like knowing about stuff for the sake of knowing about it, much like myself, this might be a good place for you to hang out. So either skip it if you want to get right into our story or stick with me and we'll settle into a nice little beverage and then our story. It is a blizzard outside, like a full-on blizzard. And I'm not exaggerating. I love to exaggerate, but I'm actually not. It's very, very cold. It's very snowy. It's very cold, snowy, rainy, wet, awful. And so as a result, I have not really been driving. I did not make a quick run to the old liquor store for anything other than what I already have, which is like a few miscellaneous liquors. And I've got beer and I've got boxed wine that was gifted to me. And so we're just going to drink a little bit of wine. I know it's lazy and I know it's boring, but it's what we've got. Not to mention, I've kind of been on a long run of not really feeling like doing too much. So some of my cocktails lately have been weak, and some of my cocktails coming up are going to also be weak. So love it or love it. That's really what we're just going to have to roll with it until I have the desire and the ability to do better. And I'm so sorry. We will all get over it. This is brand new. It is like the finest of all the boxed wines. I haven't had boxed wine in so long. Somebody just asked me if I wanted it, and I've never once said no to free beverage. Oh, how nice. Okay. How wonderful. All right. Now that we've got our drinks, we can go ahead and talk. Okay, now I know I said that we're going to be camping out in the 1800s, and we are. I'm about to go crazy. That is my favorite point in history, really from like the Louisiana Purchase up until the Oklahoma Land Rush. But right now, I want you to pretend that we're in the late 1700s. And I want to tell you one quick thing. North America at this time did not actually revolve around Washington. It revolved around a river, a very muddy, beautiful, strong, powerful river that we still to this day call the Mississippi. Now, that particular river, it was not just water or muddy water. It was a highway. It was a lifeline. It was this very liquid spine that ran through the continent. There were farmers in Kentucky and Tennessee, and they did not send crops east over the mountains. They actually floated them south down the Mississippi to one place and one place only that mattered more than any other. And I'm sure you might be able to guess what place that might be. If you guessed New Orleans, you would be correct. Now, whoever controlled New Orleans at this time actually controlled all of American trade. They could either choke it or they could let it breathe. Now, at first, Spain actually held this very important city. Now, this worked out all right because Spain was very cautious. They were very bureaucratic. They were sometimes a little irritating. They could be kind of annoying, but Spain was also very, very weak, which is kind of a good thing in a sense. Now, for a time, Americans actually tolerated Spanish rule because they had no better option. It's kind of like that annoying friend that you can kind of put up with because they have like a nice pool or something like that. So it was working out. But then came this horrible nightmare of a scenario, and this happened in the year 1800. Now, in a very quiet European agreement called the Treaty of San Ildefonso. I'm sure I'm saying that in the most Oklahoma way I possibly could, but during this particular treaty, Spain actually handed Louisiana back, and not to this fading empire or just some cool people who were hanging out, but to Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, I know you've heard rumors and stories and probably not some great things regarding Napoleon. He was not exactly known as a rational guy. He was not exactly known as somebody that you could really compromise with. He was just kind of a power hungry little fella, which I get it. I mean, I totally get it. But Napoleon, he did not want Louisiana out of nostalgia or just because, it was a great investment or something. Napoleon was desperately and emphatically trying to build himself an empire, or really build a French empire. And he was very good at it, I will say. You got to give it to the man. He was highly motivated. He was not lazy. He was doing his part. And at the end of the day, France's old colonial dream had never fully, passed away. It had simply been waiting for the right man to help spring things into action. Now, Napoleon seemed to be that particular guy. Louisiana was going to be this little supply depot. It was going to be the beating heart of a new French presence in the Americas, which sounds great, I suppose, but that means that New Orleans was its gate. It was its entry point. It was its leverage, France's leverage, Napoleon's leverage. They were going to use it too. So when word reaches the United States, they're like, okay, we got to figure something out. We do not want to be hanging out neighbors next to this particular guy. There was an immediate response, and a lot of it was this anxiety fueled, holy hell, we've got to figure something out. And President Thomas Jefferson, old Tommy Jeff, he understood something very terrifying. He knew that Spain was very weak. He knew that France was not weak at all. A French New Orleans meant French warships, it meant French armies, it meant French ambition that was going to be parked directly on America's western border. Now, Jefferson wrote in private, which, obviously isn't so private anymore, buddy. Maybe you should have been less famous. But he wrote very privately that France at New Orleans would force the United States to, quote, marry itself to the British fleet, which they didn't really want to do. Tensions were still a bit hot. We just kind of had a war with Britain, but, desperate times, we'll do what we have to do. Now, this was not hyperbole. This was desperation. I mean, this was complete and total, like, oh my God, we don't really care for Britain, but we like you so little that we would rather marry ourselves to them than deal with these French people controlling this huge chunk of land. And most of all, old New Orleans. We can't be having that. Now, Thomas Jefferson, he was a man of contradictions. He believed in very limited government. He was very strict and took the interpretation of the Constitution very, very literally. It was a republic of farmers, not empires. And yet, he now faced a moment that demanded either very bold action or national suffocation. Now, the Constitution said nothing at all about buying foreign land, nothing about acquiring empires. Now, Jefferson knew this and it haunted him. But what he also knew was that if America lost access to New Orleans, the Western states might break away entirely. The Union itself was once again at high risk. So Jefferson took it upon himself to make a decision that was going to define his presidency and not necessarily in the way that he had envisioned for himself. He was going to try to buy just New Orleans. That was his goal. Just the city, just the port, just enough to keep the river open, just a little bit of insurance. He just wanted a little bit, just a little bit. So he sends James Monroe over to Paris. Now, once over there, James Monroe was going to join the American minister, Robert Livingston. Now, their instructions were very cautious. Their budget was very limited. Their expectations, very, very modest, if I do say so myself. They had no idea what was about to fall into their laps. Now, let me tell you, too, that while Americans are over there worried sick about losing New Orleans, Napoleon's big dreams and big plans of this amazing French empire, they were beginning to collapse. The walls were closing in. So it started in the Caribbean. This was France's most valuable colony. It was not Louisiana, if you can believe it. It was, and I'm going to say this wrong, Saint Domingue. It was modern day Haiti, is what it was. And basically, when I say Haiti, I want you to think sugar, I want you to think coffee, and I want you to think enormous wealth. This was a huge financial win for whoever owned that at the time. However, in 1791, the enslaved people of Haiti actually rose up. Now, what followed was the largest slave revolt in all of history to this day. So, France is forced to send in armies. They send in generals, they send in tens of thousands of troops. And that seemed all good and well, except for they did not realize that Haiti was going to take them down, and the elements and the diseases were going to take them down more than even the people resisting their power. Now, let's just talk about yellow fever for a second, because this is a disease that tore through French ranks with merciless efficiency. Soldiers were passing away faster than their replacements could even arrive. Now, Napoleon's brother in law, he was sent to crush the rebellion, and he ended up passing away. So, one by one, these pillars of the French Empire are just crumbling beneath them. And then one thing that was extremely terrifying to a young Napoleon is war with Britain was looming yet again. Napoleon very quickly needed to get his hands on some ships. He needed money and he needed to focus. He could not have his energy scattered about the way that it was. Now, Louisiana had turned from this wonderful grand vision of French leadership and expansion, and now it actually looked a lot more like a liability. This was a vast territory that he was not prepared to defend. He did not have the ships, the men, the money, the resources, or the motivation to handle this particular chunk of land in the name of France, especially against the world's greatest navy. So, let's cut to the year 1803. Robert Livingston, back in France, is called in by the French foreign minister. Now, Livingston expected a lot of hard bargaining over New Orleans. He's gearing up. He's like talking to himself in the mirror. He's like, "You got this. You're strong. You're firm." He's going over his bullet points. He's playing Eye of the Tiger in the background. And instead, he walks in and he heard something that was so shocking to him. He was like, "What? Please repeat that," because France was not just willing to sell New Orleans, the city. France actually wanted to sell the entire Louisiana territory, not just the port, not the city, not even just a good chunk of it, they were like, we need to get rid of the whole thing. Flash sale, buy one, get one. Now, at this time, Louisiana was not that cute little boot that we know it to be. It was actually that cute little boot plus a whole strip of land that was stretching from the Mississippi all the way to the Rocky Mountains. It began in the Gulf of Mexico and it stretched all the way up, covering parts of Montana and all that, all the way into modern day Canada. Now, Livingston, he hears that they're willing to sell all of this and he is stunned. I mean, full shock. They didn't even prepare for this. This was not in his instructions. This was not something that was authorized. This was not even remotely anticipated. He had no idea they were going to do this, but he very much understood the moment. And he later wrote, "We have lived long, but this is the noblest work of our whole lives." He was like, oh my gosh, this is huge. So, together with Monroe, he actually says, let's go ahead and do this. He arranges and agrees to the purchase. It's $15 million, which equates to about 4 cents an acre. And with a handshake, this deal reshaped the entire map. When word reached Jefferson, he did not just go into full celebration mode. I mean, it was not just kitty cats and party hats over there. He was panicking. This was full on cortisol. Had his agents overstepped? Oh, yes, they had absolutely overstepped. Was the deal unconstitutional? Oh, for sure. Yeah, especially by his standards. He was very literal with the Constitution. And Jefferson, he even considered making a constitutional amendment to make this purchase more legal and to make it coincide with the Constitution better, because it was like a itch in his brain that he couldn't scratch. He did not like it, but he did know that time was very, very short. Napoleon could very easily change his mind. He did not have a reputation for being some cool, go with the flow, stable character. On top of that, the British could very easily intercept the deal, and that was going to be a hard pass. Absolutely not. We cannot let that happen. Congress itself could actually say, we're not doing this either. So Jefferson, he actually did something very rare and very out of character for him personally. He very quickly swallowed his doubts, swallowed his fears, and he sent the treaty straight to the Senate. And in October 1803, the Senate ratified the Louisiana Purchase. No amendment, no delay, just swift action. And the United States ended up doubling in size overnight. Now, with this purchase, it gained control over the Mississippi River, the port of New Orleans, which was, the big one. It inherited vast farmland, untold natural resources, strategic depth against foreign powers, but it also inherited a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions, because who lived on this land? These were the lands of native nations, indigenous people that were already there. They were already sovereign. They were established. They were sacred. Then there was the question of slavery, which was always an impending question for young America. Would the new states allow slavery? This issue could and did fester, and then it exploded. And we will get to that in future episodes. But this purchase actually strengthened the nation. However, it simultaneously set the stage for a lot of future conflict, because empire, once acquired, never arrives without consequences. All this to say, the Louisiana Purchase changed literally everything. America was no longer a narrow republic hugging the Atlantic, it was continental. It went from sea to shining sea, almost. We still had some other things to work out. However, it made westward expansion very, very inevitable. It made America a lot harder to conquer, and it made it much wealthier. It made it much stronger, and somehow much more divided. And perhaps most importantly, it proved something very fundamental. The United States, when pressed, was willing to bend its ideals to survive. Because it is very funny that Jefferson, the very strict constitutionalist, became overnight Jefferson, the pragmatist, and the nation very much followed his lead. The Louisiana Purchase was not destiny, it was chance. A failed empire, a disease ridden army, a war hungry emperor, and a young nation that was more than willing to take a risk. I'm just saying, history often turns not on these great speeches, but on moments when someone says yes before the opportunity vanishes. There is always room for two things to be true at once: well thought out planning, cunning, solid, don't make a move without thinking it through, and dare I even say, impulsivity and saying absolutely fast action, act now, think later, that kind of thing. The whole country that we live in has been a ping pong between those two particular thought processes, and it has worked out. Flawed, imperfect for sure, but it's working out, you guys. And thank God it did, because even though the Louisiana Purchase definitely stirred up a lot of trouble and there were a lot of things, nothing so cut and dry, it was amazing for this country. And that particular scenario, that situation, that purchase, those treaties, etc., shifting ownership into American hands very much not just changed the maps, but it changed the way that American history played out, how it's unfolded, and how we see the world today. And again, I understand things are not perfect. They're never going to be perfect. I know that the country and the powers that be and the common people have all made a million mistakes over a couple hundred years, as humans are known to do. We screw up all the time. But fortunately, we have gotten a lot right. There have been a lot of really exciting, big, powerful, impactful moments, the Louisiana Purchase being one of them, that I personally think in the end was a very, very good move, because at the end of the day, I like our country. I like what we've done. I'm proud of us. And this was something to be proud of. This was a moment where we really did have to just go and worry about the consequences at a later date. And it worked out wonderfully. I know it's been messy, but this is where we're starting here in the 1800s with the Louisiana Purchase, because it reshaped everything. It inspired expansion and movement and travel to the West and exploration of unknown worlds. This is what turned America into something resembling the America that we know today. And again, I know it's not perfect, but we still did a lot that was really, really good. And I'm really, really proud of us. So, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the deal that made America continental, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the little bell, do all the things, because you really do not want to miss out on future stories like this one, especially because I am so excited about the next, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 videos. I don't know how long we're going to be talking about people, places, and things from the 1800s, but it's going to be a minute. This is where I love to learn about. So please stick with me, keep an eye out. And I am so happy that you are here to toast with me Thomas Jefferson, Napoleon Bonaparte, and swift action that reshaped the nation for the better, if I do say so myself, because history isn't always just what happened, it's what almost didn't happen. And those near misses are where the real stories live. And we're going to explore all of those together. Cheers to you. I will see you very, very soon. Thanks for being here.